Like, Edward was so toxic. Bella was toxic too. Oh my God. That's why she's fucked up.
I feel like that's like one serving, right?
Books and Brunch with Amber and Noelle.
Hi, welcome to Books and Brunch. I'm Noelle.
I'm Amber.
We have been chatting with author Jenna Adams, and she actually sent us her book to read and give an honest review of, which is very cool. Makes me feel like we've made it because someone actually sent us a free book. That's like the only free thing I've got in my life, unless I steal it.
I don't know if that counts as getting something for free.
Because it is available digitally and it's available in print. I read it in print, and Amber read the Kindle version.
I did, which I never do. I tried it, and I think I'm going to stick to just physical copies.
Some people really love it.
Yeah, and I know also like some people, they want the bigger print. It's nice if you want to read at night because you don't have to use a book light, but I'm old school.
Yeah, me too. 9 times out of 10 when I'm reading a book and I'm moving it around and putting it in my purse and taking it out, I lose my bookmark. My bookmark falls out. And then I have to do that thing where I skim through and try to figure out where I was.
She sent you a bookmark too, right?
Yeah. Here it is. Can you see it? It says, "Can I Stray?" And it's got a quote from Book Charity about her book. They said, "It is a nuanced reflection on relationships and a stark reminder of the need for high-quality, non-judgmental sex and relationship education for all young people." And now you might hear that and you may think, oh, this book is going to be kind of political and preachy. It's not. It's not that. I thought that. I was like, oh, here we go. So if you haven't heard of this book, that's probably because it's brand new. It was published by Neem Tree Publishing out of London. Essentially, this is what the book is about. 14-year-old Brooke Tyler has spent her whole life waiting for a boy to choose her. Matt is about to go to university, scared to leave behind everything he knows. When both are cast as romantic leads in Romeo and Juliet, they fulfill the roles of forbidden lovers both on and off the stage. Brooke is sure that her fairy tale is coming true, and best of all, Matt is an older boy. Brooke considers secrets and lies a small price to pay for her first boyfriend, but the relationship is set to cost her after one night alone in an empty auditorium. When Brooke learns that Matt's actions that night were illegal, her world shatters. Years later, Brooke and Matt reunite as adults. Matt wants to undo all the damage he caused. Brooke makes a choice which forces them both to question their relationship. This captivating debut reveals a young woman's journey for independence as she strays away from everything she has ever known to navigate her traumatic past. Basically, the first half of the book really focuses on this girl, Brooke, and this boy, Matt, when they're in this pivotal summer before Matt goes to uni and when Brooke is a freshman in high school. And then there's a jump to when they're both adults and sort of how those decisions that are made when we're young affect us on like an emotional and psychological level as adults.
And it was not what I was expecting. Like whenever you have all these trigger warnings in the beginning of a book, I think it's going to be very serious and political and kind of textbooky, I guess. But it wasn't.
No,
and
it was a great read. It was like an easy
It was.
read.
Yeah, it was. It was definitely like one of those I kept wanting to find out like what's going to happen, and it tells it from both her point of view and his point of view, which allows for like things I would have disagreed with very strongly. Then when I see it from his point of view, I'm like, oh, like I get the justification, but at the same time, being a mother of a girl, and I think about her when she's 14, I'm like, no. But when you're reading it from his point of view, you know, so I liked the back and forth. It gave a different perspective.
Well, one thing I thought about a lot is, so you're a mother of a boy and a girl. I'm a mother of just a boy, just one single boy. And it made me realize like there is a responsibility on parents to let sons know, you know, you need to be really gentle and considerate and responsible with these decisions. Hormones are crazy. The world is telling you mixed mixed things, but no one's really preparing you for what it's actually like when you're in a relationship with someone and you're both young and impressionable. It made me think a lot about like future conversations I want to have with my son when he's in high school.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, all of that needs to be done for the boy and the girl.
For
like,
sure.
It's that old stereotype of boys thinking about things differently, and this book even addresses that, because there's a point where the main character, Matt, he feels like he's being rushed into something by someone, and
Right.
it gives that point of view from a guy's point of view, and how also they're supposedly just supposed to want to do everything right away, and then that stigma when they don't, or that judgment when they don't, and they feel like they have
Right.
to
Like, what's
lie
wrong with you?
about experience. Yeah.
I had so many questions about like Jenna Adams. How do you have this insight? There's also a character in the second half of the book who is a psychologist. Dr. Sanjay was my favorite character because everything they said, I was like, oh, I needed to hear that. I was like taking notes.
Yeah.
That's why I do that.
Yeah, it was like free therapy lessons throughout this book whenever she goes and has her little meetings with him. Yeah, it's like, oh.
Literally. Yeah.
And so speaking of Jenna Adams, you had a little information about her. This is her first novel.
This is her
and
first novel.
She lives in London.
Yep, she lives and writes in London. This comes from her website, which is really cool, jennaadamswriter.com. You can also follow her on Instagram, Jenna Adams Writer. She lives in London. She writes from her third floor flat, which is covered in plants, which I think that she would be friends with me because of that. So Jenna, just throwing that out there, Jenna. No pressure, but we should be friends. She's a contributor to the Book Network, and she's passionate about exploring mental health, consent, and codependency in her writing, which comes through for sure.
Yeah, and again, all of these descriptions are so serious, but the book kind of reminded me of Normal People. Sally Rooney, is that who wrote that? And I haven't actually read the novel, but I've watched the series is on Hulu. And that one is about, starts with a teenage couple and then kind of goes into, they're in Ireland, and then it goes into, their college years. It's like that love story, but it's so messed up. But at the same time, you want to root for them. Like, you kind of want it to work out, but it's also so wrong.
Yeah. I never rooted for that relationship ever. There was never a point where I was like, I really like Brooke and Matt together. But I was definitely rooting for them both separately. Like, I'm like, wow, I really hope Matt grows up and figures himself out. And then I'm like, so many times I was frustrated with Brooke, like, be your own person. Be happy on your own. You don't need a man. Stop ditching your friends every time you have a boyfriend. Like, I wanted to, like, shake her.
See, and I was like, oh, maybe once she gets older and she's experienced stuff on her own, like, they can get back together and have what they originally wanted and everything will be okay.
No, because what they wanted wasn't real. It was that Romeo and Juliet kind of love, which I think that was a great catalyst.
They had real feelings. I feel like what they wanted was real. It was just the
14-year-olds.
wrong time.
14-year-olds aren't real people. And
Yes, they are. It made me wonder, like, whenever you have, like, your first big love, is it different because it's the first one? Or when you feel that way, is it like that's the real one? Because I had met my husband now when I had just turned 16, and then we were together for a while, and then we broke up, and I dated others, but I never felt about them the way I felt about him. And I was like, well, is it because that was my first, like puppy love, my first one, or was that I just happened to have my first one with someone I really felt that way about, but then we ended up getting back together and getting married.
my first puppy love experience was with this guy, and we were both like 16. He lived in a different town, and it was like, I mean, if he walked in the room, I was like gonna puke. And I was never boy crazy. I never, even to this day, I'm not one to like be like, oh my God, who is that guy? Or if a guy gives me compliments, to be like, this means something. I'm usually like, whatever. But no, he was like everything. Like to this day, somewhere in my mom's house, I still have a Brendan box. His name was Brendan Carney, and we're friends on Facebook and Instagram. So if he watches this, he already knows. And it's he's married, he has a kid, he's having a great life. But I had a Brendan Carney box, like to the point where he one time gave me a stick of gum, and I kept the wrapper, and it's in that box. We went to see a Coldplay concert, and the shirt that I bought, instead of wearing it like a normal person, I put it in that box. Like, that's how much I, like, was obsessed with him. Well, you know, I joined the military, and he went to college, and we didn't talk at all. And then one random day, I get a message from him on MySpace, throwback, because I was living in England. I was living in Suffolk, and he was studying abroad in France, and he wanted to meet me in London. And this was years later. We're both in our 20s, and I was like, couldn't breathe, like nervous for a week. I couldn't eat. I was like, what do I wear? Oh my gosh, we're gonna get together. We're gonna have that thing that never. We're gonna see how it all ends up. And we got to London, and like it wasn't like that. It was like hanging out with like an old friend. There were no butterflies. There was no romance, and so I was like, oh. It was probably just hormones. If we had never had that experience to check in on those feelings, I could still to this day be like, he was the one that got away.
I wanted Matt and her to work out. I felt like it was not the right time, seeing as how she was 14. But,
yeah. Well, and I mean, as a teenager, we didn't talk about consent like the way that they do now. Like, yeah. I just figured if you already kissed a guy, he expects you to have sex with him, and so you do.
I never felt that way. I also, though, I felt like in this book, some of it, and I know that that's what they teach now for a reason, but they almost, in this book, they're saying, you know, it's not the girl's responsibility to say no or stop. It's the guy's responsibility to ask permission with like every step. And I'm like, that just is like really takes you out of the moment, doesn't it? Like I would feel like you just keep going until like one of you is like, okay, no, like far enough. Like as if at every moment you're like, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? Like, you know. And I understand being like overcautious, but at the same time I'm like, that's not very romantic. Like,
well, with Brooke and Charlie, like their relationship, he kind of was checking in with her the whole time, and I still felt that was romantic and it was sweet. One of the things that I thought was one of the most important but kind of understated moments in the book is there's a character named Kaylee who, when Matt goes to university, he dates her. When they have sex, she basically says to him, like, it shouldn't hurt the first time. It should be this, like, gentle experience that the male, who it feels good to right out the gate, should be aware that it could be painful for the woman, and he can do different things to help it not be painful for the first time. And that her first time was not like that. It hurt really bad and she bled. Then Matt was like, oh crap, like it hurt Brooke.
And that honestly was the first time I've ever heard someone, or you know, fictional character, real anybody say the first time doesn't have to. I've never known anyone that their first time didn't. Like,
yeah. Was your first time traumatic or was it good?
We're not gonna get into my
Why? I mean, this is what it's about. I mean,
no, I'm not going there.
I wish that I had this book at 13, because I lost my virginity at 14 at a hotel party to a guy in his 20s, and I to this day don't know it. I don't know his name. I had been drinking Goldschlager that he gave me, and I woke up the next morning in the most pain of my life and had so much shame and so much regret, but didn't tell a soul until I got a therapist in my 20s. A book like this might have been really important for me to have read as a teenager.
Yeah.
Even after it happened, to be like, hey, that wasn't my fault. That was a grown-up.
Very much so, yeah. No, mine wasn't traumatic at all. But I just, certain things I keep private.
I respect the hell out of that.
Because the 10 people that watch this, it's none of their business. So. You want to get to the recipe?
So I lived in England, and I got really excited about this. I mean, you saw that if you follow us on Instagram. I've talked about the how much I love the British phrases and stuff in the book. But I made chips and gravy for our recipe, so that it was it's British. It's something that Brooke tries to make for Charlie and ruins it. She burns the chips. If you've ever been to a British pub, it's always on the menu. And some people are like, why would you put gravy on chips? But it's also a French dish called poutine, so it's just kind of a European.
And chips is actually fries, right?
Right, and crisps are chips in England.
Yes. Yeah. For a drink, I contacted my friend who currently lives in London, and I said, what is like a very specifically English drink? That's stereotypical English. And so she sent me the recipe, and it's called a traditional British Pimm's. This drink, it's very summery and it's very brunchy, and you have to use Pimm's is the name brand of the liquor, but I don't know that I can get that here. So the initial recipe is you do Pimm's and lemonade, and then you do like strawberries, orange, cucumber, mint, you mix it all up, and so that's like a great brunch drink. And so my idea, instead of Pimm's, would be if you can't get it, is these, especially if you're hosting like a little brunch book discussion, these little bottles of rosé. Can you see it? Because I think they're so cute, and they're pink, and so you could just mix that with lemonade and do like a pink lemonade. And then I'm gonna make one and post pictures of it.
This is actually probably one of the first episodes we've recorded around brunch time.
Yes.
So,
and that is why I did not actually make the drink yet to have during the podcast,
you still have to work.
I still have to do things. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna want to take a nap. Plus, I wanted to show the bottle because it's so cute and it's all pink, and I didn't want to have to empty it first.
If you send the recipe to me, I'll make a little fancy one, and I'll put both of them up so you can swipe and see them both on Instagram. Another thing I really loved about this book, other than the free therapy advice, is at the back, they have included book club discussions.
Yes, I love when books do this, because sometimes I will miss points the author's trying to make, but then when they include the questions, I'm like, oh, I missed that, or it makes me think about it in the way that the author intended. That was one thing I really liked about this book was it is, I guess, like a young adult book, technically, because for most of it, they're teenagers. And I'm not totally into young adult unless they're, like the ones I read in my 20s, like Hunger Games or Twilight, like the really big ones. But generally, I don't gravitate to young adult. But in this book, it made me like question, like, well, is that wrong? Or I've always thought this way about that, and is that true? Because she really gets into the characters and explains what they're doing and their reasoning. And so,
I would say if people want it, because for me, I don't like young adult stuff. I don't want to read about teenagers. I do not care. But because that was only the first half of the book, and then you get to see them on the other side of adulthood, I actually found it really compelling. That second half of the book I flew through. Like, I loved reading that second half of the book when they were adults. So I'm glad that there was both of that. If this whole book had been about teenagers, there's no way I could have cared. But I really did care about them as adults. One thing I wanted to say, though, is after the acknowledgments, there's actually hotlines and websites for if you are reading this and you're like, I think that I am a codependent. There's Codependents Anonymous on here. There's Young Minds offers information support for children, young people on mental health and well-being, self-harm and all that stuff. So I think that's very cool. Sexual assault hotlines, unhealthy relationship hotlines, sexual health hotlines. I remember reading Perks of Being a Wallflower, which that's actually what this book reminded me. This reminded me of Girl Interrupted meets Perks of Being a Wallflower. When I read Perks of Being a Wallflower, that was the first time I'd ever read a book that talked about like sexual abuse, but it was something that I didn't relate to, but I remember being like, I feel a lot of these feelings, but I never had that experience. Who do I talk to about these things? My librarian? I think that as a society, we're just more open about talking about things like this, and the fact that Jenna thought to include it in the back of the book is, I don't know, just a really great little thing.
Resource.
Yeah.
The book club questions, I've got them, so they come also on the Kindle edition. The first one, where do you stand on the age difference at the beginning of the book? Did the way you feel about it change by the end of the book?
Yeah, I thought that the age difference was fucked up. Clearly illegal for a reason, especially in England where 18-year-olds can drink. 18-year-olds are viewed as more adultish than even in the United States, where 21 is like the legal drinking age. And 4 years, like 18 to 14, is a really big difference.
Those 4 years are a huge difference. Like 20 to 24 or 24 to 28. Like, I wasn't that bothered by it because it was giving both of their perspectives, and I wasn't bothered by it until I thought about my daughter at 14. Or like myself looking back, and I'm like, yeah, that is way too young. But when you're reading, you're not seeing the person, and so from her perspective, she seemed to have the feelings of like, you know, a 17-year-old, but you're not seeing her face and like how young she is, so it's easy to kind of lose perspective of her age and what it actually means.
Well, my biggest thing is, if someone ever asks you to keep your relationship a secret, that's like the biggest red flag. And I felt so sad for her. I don't think he was malicious, and I don't think he was like a pedophile, but I do think that he was young and selfish. And yeah, if you're asking someone to keep your relationship a secret because you're afraid you're going to get into trouble, that's you acknowledging that you know what you're doing is wrong.
It's yeah. That's where it's like, yeah, he knew what he was doing was wrong, because of that.
Meg, who ran the drama club, was like, do not, or I will call the cops. Like, he not only knew it and felt it, but he was told by a respected authority figure, this is not okay. Even if you think or feel it's okay, it's not. I'm here to tell you it's not.
I guess one of the things that made me, hesitant on condemning the age difference was that he had zero experience. He'd only ever kissed, and that was it. And so he was also very physically innocent. It wasn't like this 18-year-old who's like got all this experience. And so that to me made him seem younger. And so that, I guess that's where I was not immediately like
ready to hang him, which I think Jenna Adams did a really good job, because it's like the Lolita effect. When you're reading the book Lolita, you simultaneously hate the main character for what he's doing, but you also kind of sympathize with him because it's from his perspective. So she did a really good job. I mean, that's good writing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I love a book that will make you question your previously held beliefs.
Absolutely, yeah.
The second question is, the theme of consent features heavily in Can I Stray? There is one scene where the characters seem to view consent as something of a gray area. In your opinion, how complicated is the issue of consent actually?
We kind of talked about that at the beginning. I think that I've never had someone talk to me about consent, but I think that it's something I want to talk to my kid about for sure. I don't think consent has to be complicated, but I think if alcohol's involved, for sure, that's a discussion to have. Like,
Yeah.
don't.
I had no problem. I told everyone no.
See,
Like
that's
no one wanted to date me because I was like no.
good for you. Oh,
I was called
wish.
in college. They called me Virgin Mary, prude, like all these names because all my roommates
gosh.
were not saying no. Okay, so Brooke's mental health is connected to her codependency. What effect do you think this has on her, and do you relate in any way to her character?
I related to her mental health struggle not because of codependency, but more because of identity. I think that, like, being 14 when I lost my virginity under, weird circumstances, it made me view myself as, like, am I wrong? Am I broken? Am I fucked up? I'm keeping this secret that no one knows about. And I mean, I don't know. I never had a good therapist as a teenager like Dr. Sanjay, but I'm sure my self-harm played into that. My sort of like inability to say no as an adult played into that. I'm a people pleaser because I think that gives me power. If people like me, but then I secretly hate them or don't need them, that gives me power. Like all of that. I mean, I think that Brooke was, to me, a very real character.
I related to her in the like having a father that's not present, even though hers was like
Yes.
way more present than mine was. And then like the depression, and the thing with depression is, she creates all these stories in her mind of, there's something kind of fundamentally wrong with her. It's not
Everyone
really
in my life everyone would be better
They'll
off
be better
without me.
Yeah, and people don't like me, people are looking at me, like that. I related to all of that. And then the when you're feeling depressed, because it's like when it's a chemical thing, it affects your emotions. Well, then logically you're like, okay, why do I feel this way? And so you'll come up with reasons why you feel that way.
I must feel this way because I'm crazy, because I'm bad.
Yeah, or because they don't like me, or because, and so you create these reasons because your body feels a way for a reason and your mind knows that. So then your mind tries to make sense of why you're feeling sad or why you're upset. So then you create situations. And so I all of that she was doing, and I was like, people who've never experienced that or depression or anxiety, if they're reading this book, they'll probably find her like just completely irrational, but that's what your mind does to you. It tries to rationalize irrational feelings.
When Dr. Sanjay talks about you need multiple support pillars, because if your whole identity and your well-being is on one person, which Brooke had a habit of being like, if this person loves me, if I'm good enough for this person, then I'm good enough, then I'm a whole person, then I'm okay. But if they are gone, or if they waver at all because they're human, like even Charlie, who seemed like the perfect guy, had his moments where he lost his cool, or he was a little bit irrational, and or he got angry, and you're like, oh no, Brooke's gonna fall apart because she has no self-identity outside of how one person sees her.
And then, okay, in therapy with Sanjay, Brooke describes some of Matt's behavior in their relationship as toxic. Do you think Matt is a toxic person? What are some of the traits of a toxic relationship? I don't think that he was a toxic person. I think that he was very inexperienced himself and had never had a relationship himself. I think what he did, he knew better, but I don't think him as a person was toxic.
However, he was toxic when they met up for coffee and was like, you mean you didn't come back for me? I was like, fucking calm down, Matt.
I don't think that was toxic. I think that he had feelings for her, and it hurt him that like she'd been back for a month and hadn't even thought twice about it.
I think he thought that if they got back together, it would alleviate the guilt that he had for all of these years, because he'd be like, okay, I didn't take advantage of a minor. I was in love and she loved me back, and look, we're together and now no harm, no foul. I know that that's cynical. I don't think he was a toxic. First of all, I think all people are toxic. Like, I think that we all have something really toxic in us, and it's just like something we work daily on not being.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Matt was like exceptionally toxic by any means. Now, like, who's the guy that she dated when she first gets to Seattle?
Oh, Pete.
Pete. That's a fucking piece of shit toxic guy. Matt was not that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, at various points in the book, Brooke is involved in relationships with Matt, Pete, and Charlie. What do you believe each of them represent?
Matt was just the first love, first young love.
Crush, yeah.
Pete represents the first time that she was able on her own to acknowledge this is fucked up. I gotta get out of this. And Charlie
and he kind of kept her numb.
Yeah. And Charlie was the first time she was treated right and got her on the path to like wellness and being able to stand on her own. Like, Charlie did a really good job of helping her try to be a full person.
Yeah, and I wanted her, I'm like, why are you not staying with Charlie? Like,
and I think that sometimes we have those relationships where we're like, this isn't the person I'm supposed to end up with, but this relationship was so crucial. Like, Charlie really saved her from Pete.
Yeah.
Helped her not be homeless, but then also got her a therapist and health insurance in America and all of these things. But I think that they would have never been equals because he did so much for her.
Yeah, see, I was like, he's perfect. He just takes care of her.
Oh my God.
Okay, let's see. Matt has very different sexual relationships with Georgia, Brooke, and Kaylee. What do each of these reveal about his relationship with women and sex, and how do they reflect society's wider attitudes to sex? Who was Georgia?
Georgia was the girl who tried to go all the way, and he was like, no.
Oh, yeah.
Georgia was, like, represented society's pressure on men to, like, get laid. Yeah. Put another notch in the belt. Like, Georgia made it really easy for him, but Matt was like, this is not what I want. Like, I want to have this connection, and I want to take it slow. Brooke represented sort of the fantasy of what sex is. Like, she loved everything that he did. Brooke would never say, like, hey, Matt, you should probably be better. Or, like, Brooke would never be that person that pushed him to be better. Kaylee was like a teacher.
I think with Georgia, it represented like this stereotypical viewpoint that guys just, that's all they want and care about, because he actually like said no, he wanted more. And then with Brooke, he was experiencing the other side of a relationship up until that one night. I mean, they basically acted like friends, but with like stronger feelings.
Yeah,
with, like, attraction.
The power dynamic was super weird in his relationship with Brooke. To be able to say to someone, you better not tell anybody. Did you tell them? Did you tell them about our relationship? All right, sneak out of your house. I'm going to pick you up around the corner, and then I'm going to drop you off in the dark, and you have to walk home alone. The fact that when he found her in the bathtub, almost dead, and did not stay because he didn't want to get in trouble when the paramedics got there, for me, that was like, you care so much about getting in trouble, you do not care about this person. If I had found someone who had tried to kill themselves after an incident that I was involved in, I'm not saying it was his fault at all, because Brooke clearly had suffered from a chemical imbalance. But the fact that he did not stay there sometimes, like, if people pass out, you got to keep them there. Like, hey, stay with me, make sure she's breathing. The fact that he dipped, I kind of wrote him off after that. I mean, I still cared about him, as if I tried to imagine, like, what if this was my son? What would I say to him about how he could be better?
Yeah.
Like, I definitely was like, don't put him in jail, don't hang him, but somebody tell him you're not being a good human being right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like he was put in a really tough position right there.
He
because
put himself in it.
Well, I mean, because he went and he was worried about her, so he was going to help her, and he waited till they were almost there because he would have went to jail and been a sex offender for the rest of his life. I got the dilemma that he was put in.
Yeah. You were raised on teen vampire love, so you love that older, dangerous, we can't be together, I love you, get away from like our society, women have been so ingrained to kind of think that toxicity is romance, and it is not.
When Brooke returns to the UK, Lucy, Amy, and Callum have contrasting reactions to her return. Why do you think that is? How would you react in their position?
I'd
react like Amy.
Me too. I would be Amy.
I think it's the fact of like disappeared and didn't let anyone know where she was, and so they were worried.
Yeah. Amy's reaction was spot on for a sister, for sure.
At the end of the book, the characters talk a lot about accountability. Why is it important for both of them to take accountability for their actions? Do you think Brooke and Matt are held accountable for their actions? Do you think one has to take more accountability than the other? I would say Matt should have had more accountability.
For sure.
Than her, because he was the one committing the illegal act. He was the one that was older. He was the one telling her to hide it. He was the one that knew, you know,
he had the power.
It was
he
wrong.
Had the power in their relationship.
I would say she had the power, because at any moment she could take him down. Like,
but she didn't. But
he
she
was
didn't
the one.
Know. She didn't know until she was in sex ed the following year, and they were like, "That's statutory rape," and she was like, "What?"
So it says, Can I Stray is a work of fiction, but it draws on real-world experiences. How has this story informed or even challenged your understandings of victimhood, agency, and consent? Do you consider Brooke a victim? Is Matt also a victim or not?
I think Matt's a victim of society to an extent, or was.
I would say Matt was a victim of time, like Edward. They were the wrong age when they met the one they loved. Okay, so the last question. There are many adults that could have intervened in the relationship between Brooke and Matt, but don't. How responsible as a society are we in creating the sorts of conditions that create boys or men like Matt and girls, women like Brooke?
Oh, that's hard because, like, as an adult, like, how involved do you get? Like, say you're the teen community theater director. How involved do you get? Do you take Brooke aside and be like, hey, I feel like I see you giving puppy dog eyes to Matt. He is a grown-up. He could go to jail if he ever did anything with you physically. That's dangerous. Stay away.
I feel like from the get-go, Meg did wrong in casting them.
Oh, yeah.
As a couple who kiss and pushing them together and then being like, that's wrong. It's like, you should not have casted them.
Yeah, well, okay. Think about how uncomfortable Matt's mom was at the play. And then they get home. That would have been a really good opportunity for her to be like, and she talks about it. She's like, I don't think you should have, Meg should have cast a 14-year-old for Juliet. But I think that beyond that, the mom should have been like, you do not pursue that. Like, if she has feelings for you, it's because she's a child. That's not real.
Also, and I'll say a child's feelings are real, but they're also not understood. And that's how they're able to be groomed, is people are like, they're a child, they don't know. And it's like, they can have real feelings. They're just, you know, if they're having feelings with someone else who's also a child, then it's a crush and it's cute. And
right.
You know, like, you go to the movies together and your mom sits behind you because you're both children and you're both treated like children. Kids can be hurt emotionally and they can love, and that, you know, it's all real. It's just very uninformed and immature, and they need to be protected. So I went to a very small high school, and there was a children's home nearby the school, and so all of the children's home children went to this school. and there was a girl, and she was a senior, and she lived at the children's home, and she started dating the boys basketball coach, who was probably mid to late 20s, maybe older. I'm not sure. He was also our English teacher.
Oh, no.
And me and my friends knew they were dating. And, like, his office was, like, you go through the gym, and then his office was back there. She would go have lunch with him, and, like, we would go back there and hang out with them. Like, we all knew that they were together. And then, like, a week or two after graduation, they got married. Here's this girl who lives at the children's home. So she does not have parents.
She has no support structure, no pillars, zero pillars.
Here's an older man, and he's one of the coaches in the yeah, they ended up having, I think, a kid and getting divorced. It wasn't an equal relationship.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it was, it couldn't be. And I think, yeah, they ended up like fighting all the time because, yeah, you need that time where you're like learning who you are and that you're an adult and you're on your own.
But I think if you're in a position of power and there is someone, and it doesn't need to be like, I mean, Matt had a position of power just being the senior, you know?
Mm-hmm.
and being experienced in this theater group, and Brooke is new and she's a freshman. Like that power dynamic is something that I think we should talk to kids about, because I don't think they realize it.
I don't know, but
I say sometimes when we experience emotional, especially sexual trauma, that our emotional maturity stops developing at that age. Like it's like stunted. So say you experience sexual trauma at 14, until you start unpacking and dealing with it, your emotional reactions to things stay around the age of a 14-year-old. So in the future, maybe you get into a fight with someone, and as a 25-year-old, you should be able to handle it maturely. But because of the fact that your emotional maturity level didn't get past 14, you kind of throw a fit. You just act like a child, and it's like, I think about that a lot. Sometimes when I meet people and they react to me in a very like childish way, I have to step back and be like, don't hold it against them. They probably had some sort of trauma that you're not privy to, and this is how they reacted to things as a younger person, and they've never learned the skills to mature beyond that. And that's a them thing, not a me thing.
that makes me think about a few people that we both know.
Just reading books about stuff like this and talking about this, it does make me a more compassionate person towards other people. Like, you don't know what other people's struggles are. It would be really easy to hate Matt if you didn't know what his experience with Georgia was like. If you know, it would be really easy to think Brooke was a piece of shit and a lazy asshole because she couldn't do laundry on the weekend that her boyfriend was gone. But if you didn't understand how that codependency was crippling, you know, it's really easy to judge somebody if you don't know what's going on inside of their own head.
Jenna Adams did a fantastic job of showing multiple points of view and making you like relate or empathize with the different points of view. And then the counselor, like the advice he gives, and like she had to have spoken to a counselor to be like, what would you tell this character? Well, I really liked this book. I would recommend it.
And we're not just saying that because it was free.
We were talking about with The God of Endings, that was her debut novel. Like with a lot of debut novels, when they don't have the backing of like a huge publisher, they're fighting for, you know, marketing so people know about their book. And this is one of those cases. They do have to reach out to people and be like, hey, please, you know, review this book, please read it, even though, but it is really good. Like, I recommend it. I like it. Again, this is the second book we've read that I really like, would just sit down and want to read and not turn the TV on. It's a page turner or a screen swiper.
Yeah, they almost read like two different books. Like the first half is very like John Green, and then the second half is like a little bit more Colleen Hoover. Like you've got a YA book and then an adult book in two parts. The second half actually really reminded me of Cleopatra and Frankenstein. That was also took place in England. and was about kind of toxic codependent relationships, about a British person who needed a visa to be in England, which I thought that was very interesting that Jenna Adams decided to give Brooke a dual citizenship. So that was one less thing she needed to depend on a man for.
And then next up, are we doing Handmaid's Tale now?
Yes.
I have read Handmaid's Tale. It's been several years, but I think I can't wait to see your review and reaction because I think you're gonna have big feels.
So I have this thing, you know this, but I don't like when things are popular. I wait until they're not popular. If I like to like
also,
things
yeah.
before they're popular, and if I missed the boat, then I'm like, fuck that. And it wasn't until we read Oryx and Crake that I was like, oh man, I loved Margaret Atwood. She's so cool.
And well, it was written in the 80s. And then the Hulu show gave it that kind of second wind. And then after the Hulu show, Margaret Atwood went back and wrote The Testaments, which is a sequel to Handmaid's Tale, kind of based on the show too. And then the show waited till her sequel was out, and then they did that one.
This is going to be fun. I thought this was going to be a way bigger book, if I'm being honest. But look, I got the version of the book on Amazon that looks like a Bible.
I wanted a first edition, but they were way too expensive. I do have a first edition of The Testaments, and I have it signed by Margaret Atwood. So this is the cover. Can you see that one?
I've seen that one.
That's the one from the 80s.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Jenna Adams. Thank you, Neem Tree Press, for sending us the copies. Loved reading it. I actually can't wait to give this to my sister-in-law. She's gonna love it. I'm just gonna. This copy will be passed around. It'll be like the Sisterhood of the Traveling book. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Love free shit. Send us
Books and
free
Brunch
shit.
with Amber and Noelle.